Good morning, happy Friday. Back with Ranger in Time, D-Day Battle on the Beach. Let's see what's gonna happen with Ranger and maybe Leo. This chapter. Chapter 7, Smoke and Bombs. Bombers! Leo shouted. He scooped up the cat, jumped to his feet, and stumbled over the stones. Come on, dog, run to the ditch! Ranger leaped out of the rubble and waited at the edge of the house. The planes made a loud rumble that rattled him from his paws to his tail. They were coming closer by the second. The boy needed to hurry. Ranger barked at him. Leo scrambled over a jumble of fallen shelves. He had to put Belle down to climb through a heap of stones that used to be the pantry. The planes droned louder and louder. Belle leaped over a fallen beam and tore through the garden. Belle, no! Leo hoisted himself up and chased after her, tripping through the broken rocks. The planes roared almost overhead. Ranger barked, faster, or they'd never make it to the ditch in time. Leo pumped his legs as hard as he could, sloshing through the wet field with the shaggy golden dog beside him. He couldn't see Belle anymore. He could only hope she'd run to the ditch where Mr. and Mrs. Blanc were waiting. Leo sucked in great gulps of damp morning air. His legs burned. The planes were screaming overhead. Why couldn't he run faster? Then Leo's foot caught on a rock, and he flew forward. Whoomph! He landed on his stomach in the mud, and he couldn't breathe at all. The planes were deafening. Leo didn't dare look. He curled into a ball, as small as he could, and covered his head with his arms. Ranger crouched low beside him. The bombers roared so low they shook the earth. But nothing fell. There was no blast this time. The planes thundered over them and continued inland. Leo finally caught his breath and tipped his head up to look. The planes were already growing smaller. Where were they headed? He thought of his grandparents and his mother, still in Paris as far as he knew, and said a quiet prayer for their safety, for all of his family's safety, wherever they were. And then he thought of his older sister, Rebecca. Where was her cat? Leo stood and started trudging through the field again. Belle, where'd you go, Belle? Ranger walked alongside him, and after a few minutes they came to a shallow ditch. It looked like someone had dug it quickly. Shovels were tossed on the ground nearby, but whoever had been there was now gone. It wasn't as deep as the other ditch on the beach, but it was better than nothing. They needed shelter, even though the planes were gone for now. Ranger nudged Leo toward the ditch. Leo pushed back. He squinted into the distance and thought he saw a flash of white in the thick bushes along the ridge near the beach. Leo hesitated. It was smokier and louder over that way. The Allies and Germans must be fighting near the sea. And what if the bombers returned? It would be safer to take cover, but Leo had to keep the promise he'd made to Rebecca the last time that he'd seen her. That was 2 summers ago on the day of the roundup. Leo remembered it as if it was yesterday. How could he forget the banging at their apartment door? French police dragged his entire family out of bed that morning, marched them away, and crammed them into a crowded truck that brought them to the Veldrum de Hiver, the big cycling stadium near the Eiffel Tower. The police packed the stadium with thousands of Jewish men, women, and children. There was no food or water for 2 days. Leo's eyes and throat burned with the awful smells of too many people with nowhere to use the bathroom. Leo's mother had been sick before they left. Her cough grew deeper and more rattly by the hour. Finally, his father convinced an officer to send her to see a doctor at the hospital. Leo was sent along to care for her. As he left, Rebecca said, "If you get back to the apartment, you must feed Belle." "All right," Leo said, and started to go, but Rebecca clutched his wrist. Her eyes shone with tears. "Be safe," she whispered. "Care for her, and for yourself." "I will, I promise." Then Leo followed the soldiers who loaded his mother into a truck and drove her to the hospital across town. They put her in a crowded room with 5 other women. The following morning, Leo's memoir arrived. Somehow she'd learned they were at the hospital. She kissed Leo on the cheeks, then sat by his mother's bed and stroked her hair. When the doctor stepped out, there were whispered words between Memoir and his mother. The next thing Leo knew, Memoir was hurrying him out of the hospital and through the crowded streets. He spent the night at his grandparents' small apartment. In the morning, they hurried down the block to the empty apartment Leo's family had left the day before. Mimir packed up some clothes for Leo. She carefully removed the yellow star from his jacket. "But Mimir," Leo said, "won't I get in trouble with the police?" The Nazis required Jews to wear a yellow star and carry identity papers at all times. "Hush," Mimir whispered. "Come with me." Leo scooped up Belle under one arm and tucked her into the bag with his clothing. Thankfully, the old cat was quiet. Mimir rushed Leo through the city streets to the train station, gripping his hands as they walked past German soldiers at the gate. They boarded a train for Normandy. Mimir's eyes darted everywhere. Leo didn't dare to speak. It was only when the train chugged away at the buildings of Paris, gave way to fields and farmhouses, that Mimir seemed to breathe again. It wasn't safe in Paris anymore, she explained as they rattled through the countryside, and it wasn't safe to be Jewish anywhere. Leo would have to pretend to be a Catholic boy helping on his uncle's farm. Leo was good at pretending. Mimir reminded him it wouldn't be forever. Whenever it felt safe enough, Mimir had come to see him on the farm. She'd visited several times in the 2 years since she'd left him. Every time Leo asked when he could go home. Mimir's answer was always the same. Soon, she hoped. Soon. So here's a picture of what must be Mimir and Leo. Oh, there you go. When Leo asked about his mother, his father, and his sister, Mimir only said they should pray. Pray for the Allies to come soon, and hopefully one day they might be together again. Today, in a morning of smoke and bombs, the Allies had finally arrived. Leo held his hand over his eyes to block the sun and stared off into the distance. He caught a glimpse of Belle's black and white tail swishing the leaves and took off, running toward the beach. The next chapter, chapter 8, is called Danger in the Shadows. Ranger raced in front of Leo and tried to block his way. The smoky beach wasn't safe, but Leo pushed Ranger aside and kept running. When they reached the row of prickier bushes, where Leo thought he'd seen the cat, he crouched low and whistled. "Belle," he called, pushing branches aside. But the cat wasn't there. Leo climbed higher on the ridge to see where she might have gone. He hoisted himself over a rocky ledge, stood up, and gasped. Leo dropped to the ground and stared out toward the water. His heart thudded against his ribs as he tried to take in the scene spread out before him. Everywhere he looked, soldiers with rifles pressed to their shoulders were aiming up to the cliffs. Huge trucks crawled all over the beach. Skeletons of burned-out tanks littered the shore. The sea was clogged with ships of every size. Wave after wave of soldiers spilled from the boats and surged to the sand. Leo's beautiful beach, with its cool winds and crashing waves, has exploded into a mess of smoke and twisted metal. Leo's heart sank. Belle always lurked under the bed when the farmhouse was too noisy. He would never find her in the middle of this chaos. She was probably scared to death, unless she'd found some place to hide. Leo crept forward on his hands and knees to a higher spot on the ridge. His hands were scraped and the bushes scratched at his belly through his shirt. But maybe from here he could see where she might have gone. So here's what he is seeing on the beach. Just on the hill was a pillbox, a little concrete building where soldiers took shelter. The Germans had built them all up and down the coast because they knew the Allied forces might come across the English Channel by boat. This one sat quietly now. Was it empty? It could be cool and dark inside, just the kind of place Belle loved to hide. But what if someone else was hiding there? Leo picked up a rock the size of a small apple. He took a deep breath and then threw it into a thicket near the pillbox. Then he ducked low and waited. If there were German soldiers inside, they'd come out to investigate, wouldn't they? They'd have to make sure the noise wasn't an enemy hiding in the bush. Leo waited with his heart pounding. The pillbox sat quiet and undisturbed. Carefully, Leo crept down the hill on his knees and elbows, belly to the ground. Ranger followed him. He was good at staying down. He practiced climbing under obstacles in his training with Luke and Dad. Soon they were down the hill, beside the bushes, at the edge of the little building. Leo crawled toward the entrance to the pillbox. Belle, he whispered. Are you there, girl? Ranger sniffed the air. He caught the scent of several men who had come this way, but those scent trails weren't fresh. Belle, come on out, Leo whispered as he approached the door. Ranger crept closer to the concrete box and lifted his nose again. Smoke choked the air and made it harder for him to pick out the other smells. But there! A man smell drifted out from the box. Ranger barked, but it was too late. Don't move! A rough voice shouted. Leo froze. A soldier appeared in the doorway, aiming down a rifle at him. So the next chapter that we'll read on Monday is called Enemy or Friend. So it must be something with that guy that just approached Leo and Ranger. Have a great weekend.